Hi, Perry from Manga Guitars here again. If you haven't seen my previous videos on picking lumber and laying out and gluing up a body blank, go ahead and check those out after the video's fine. Either way, this video is about guitar design. At a certain point in your build process, whether before you even buy lumber or after you buy lumber, it's important to address the design. The way I go about doing that, what I find is the most helpful is to draw it out full scale. Really helps me see what I'm getting myself into. So if you look here, I have a roll of drafting paper here and I've drawn out a center line. This is the first step. I go ahead and I draw out a center line roughly in the middle of the paper, and I have my body shape here. From my perspective, this is lefty. From your perspective, probably the opposite. What I'm shooting for is a lefty take on this design, which is my take on a classic design. I call this body shape the javelina. So we'll be laying this out to be a lefty. All right, so I have my body drawn on here. What I like to do is lay it on here a few inches from the end. And this gives me space to kind of deal with the roll up of the paper, and I just tape it down to my workbench here. So I got what I'll call a dummy neck. This is a neck blank that I made years ago that I ended up not using. The advantage here is I get to use it as a template. So I can see on here where I want to place my neck. And I have a center line on here, so I can go ahead and line up that center line with my center line on the paper and get a good idea of where I want my neck. Now I know that my preference as a player is I don't necessarily play up here in the hero zone. But others might. So I want to give access to that, and I might do that by carving a recess in here down the line. I'm not sure yet. All I know is that I just want a good amount to allow me to get 2 bolts into the neck pocket at least. So the other thing I'm going to look at when I have my neck roughly in place is I'm going to line up 25.5 inches is my scale length, and I want to see where my bridge is going to fall roughly. So if I'm using this template of the bridge that I made for the javelina, I get to see this front line right here is my scale length, and this back line here is the intonation line where my saddles are most likely going to fall. So if I line up my template on center, I can see where my scale length is going to be and where my bridge is going to be in relation to the body. What I've noticed here is that it's pretty much in the middle of the body, and what that's going to do is that's going to give me a lot of weight back here. So what I want to do is move this back a little bit and see where that puts me. And I know for myself as a player, I don't really play in this area too much. So if I'm building this guitar for myself, then I'm going to take that into consideration. I'm going to go ahead and line up my roller again, and I'm going to get my bridge into position. And that to me looks a little more balanced. It was just a hair that I moved it, but it's a little more in balance. So if I'm going to use this as my neck placement, then I'll go ahead and with my pencil, I'm going to go ahead and mark the end of it here, and I'm going to use this fingerboard to lay out where it's actually going to go. Okay, now I'm going to take my yardstick and I'm going to come to 25.5 inches, and I'm going to make this mark here, and I'm going to go ahead and use my protractor to lay out where my nut is going to be, and I like to make that wider than the nut is going to be. And I'm going to take my protractor here, and I prefer a 22 fret neck. So I'm going to go ahead and make that mark, and I make that wider. This is where my 22nd fret is going to be, and this is where my bridge is going to, or my scale length is going to be, and I like to make that nice and wide. It lets me know, it lets me line up my templates properly. So when I line up my template here, I can have it like this, or I can flip it to get that sort of real lefty feel, like I'm playing the guitar upside down. And I like the way, what I can see now by having this in front of me is I really like the way these lines flow. And the reason why we draw this out is to get a good idea of flow. We want a sense of motion, like the guitar is moving as we design it. And so when I put this neck on here, I can see the reverse headstock actually really looks good. On this javelina here, I have a reverse headstock, and that's my preference as a designer. I think it works great with the body in reverse or in a standard right-handed position. The next thing that I get to look at is knobs. And these knobs here are made by my friend Matthew Hermes of Hermes Hardware. And I get to have an idea of what knob will look better. I've got a big fat amberish knob, or I have this smaller knob in this white and gold, or I have a chicken head knob. And what I'm looking for right now is where is this knob going to be in relationship to this space, whether it's this one or any of them, and where is it going to be in relation to my playing hand. I want it to be close enough to where I can grab it with my pinky to roll it, but I don't want it so close that it crowds the hardware. So this is a great time to be able to play with knobs. Maybe I want two different shaped knobs on here. Maybe I'm only going to have one knob. My tendency is to make single pickup guitars. So in this case, I might just need a volume knob or volume control. The other thing that I get to do is see how much room I have in here to place my pickups, whether it's going to be one or two. The other thing I like to do is, if I'm working on a headstock design, I love to use graph paper. It gives me a nice grid to work with and lay out my tuners where I need to get them nice and evenly. So these red lines, they represent the width of my lumber, and this is going to be my center line. And what I can do is I can just fold this over on that red line and line up my center line with this center line, and I can create my nut spacing right here and get a good idea of the length of my headstock. If I was laying this down on here, it looks something like that. So this gives me an easy way to draw out a headstock without having to draw out all of these parameters and try and keep things square. The graph paper gives me an easy way out, seemingly. So we have our bridge placement. We've got our hardware. I get a rough idea of what my headstock's going to look like. Once I have my drawing down and complete, and I'm really happy with what it looks like on paper, the next thing I do is I cut this out with the razor blade, and I'll use spray adhesive. I'll spray this down on some plywood, and I'll cut this out as a body template, and I'll go ahead and make a neck template the same way, and I'll put these two together. And then what I'll do is I'll move that neck in and I'll move it out, and using a clamp, I'll know roughly how the guitar is going to feel. And this is the beginning to making templates to help you recreate guitars with grace and ease. So if you found any of this information helpful, if you know anyone that can benefit from this, please like and share. I will appreciate your questions and comments down below. And once again, I'm Perry from Munga Guitars. I will see you next time.